Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our Finance and Corporate Services Committee. We only have a few items today, but some of them are fairly important, so we'll get right into it. Could I get a mover for the consent items? Moved by Councillor Ioannidis. 1 second here. My screen isn't showing up. Oh, there we go. I'm not seeing anyone with any issues, so those in favor? And that carries unanimously. We'll get right into item number 2, the discussion on the user fees. There is no staff presentation on this, so we can get right into questions. What we're going to do is, instead of a page flip, if you just want to queue in and ask the questions that you have, please make sure that you refer to the number on the left of the sheet so that staff knows what exactly we're referring to. Okay, Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Chair Davey. Sorry, we're just didn't expect to get too quick into this already. I guess the questions that I'm looking at was the user fees in regards to from engineering. Just can't find the page. Oh yeah, here it is. Is it with 2 lanes, 4 lanes with sewer boulevard? Can I get a better answer on what that is? Oh, sorry, on page
Mr. Reedman?
-42. It's the new fees.
New fees. Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, if you look at the lines immediately above that, there are different fees for different size water mains. So 12-inch water mains are a new size that people are connecting into. So it's just an incremental increase over the 10-inch water main for the different lane configurations.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you.
Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Yeah, I have one question on number 1141 on page 3-34. And just so you know, it sounds worse than it feels. With regards to the minor variance for fence and signs, my question is, are we not, understanding that it's to try and get to actual costs, are we not getting to a point where it's getting too high to ask residents to pay that fee? It's $1,200.
Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair, what I would say is that you're absolutely correct. The direction is to recover costs expended. The reality is we have not seen minor fee variance applications go down, so that hasn't been our experience.
Can we maybe get a breakdown of why it's so high? Like if someone's submitting and I know I was given it years ago, but someone's submitting a sign or a fence variance, what is the cost breakdown? Like what equals $1,200? I know there's one advertisement in, I think, the paper, and there's obviously staff resource time. But what else contributes to that fee?
So through you, Mr. Chair, you're absolutely correct. There is a direct cost in terms of the advertising purchased, but the staff time would add up very quickly when you think about planning staff time, clerk staff time, bylaw time. So that I would estimate is probably the bulk of that fee.
Well, I'm concerned that it's getting. Well, it's already high, but that it's getting that high, and then it's also one that has a 3% increase this year, so that's something that I would like to keep in mind as we move forward with fees and into the rest of the budget.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, on page 2-16, around 400. And 401. The meal programs that are being offered at the Rockaway Centre, I believe, is where most of them are offered. I think that's what we're looking at here. $3.97, $3.88, and $3.99. They're all at $15, $10.26. Can we just have a rounded number for that? I mean, when a senior comes to have a meal at Rockaway or the Downtown Community Centre, they have to fish around for a quarter or 26 cents Can you help me understand why we have that?
Mr. Haggie?
So I can't talk to why it's not at the dollar, but all of the fees will be rounded off to the closest 5 cents. So even though it says 10.26, it would actually be 10.25 or what have you. That's just kind of a disclaimer on all of the fees. As far as the other bits, I take it you're suggesting it would be, say, $15 or, $10 or what have you.
Yeah, so I apologize. I should have been just referring to the meal program and the meal ticket, which I believe is a service that seniors can receive at Rockway and the Downtown Community Center. They can purchase meals there. I would really like to see us try to keep this rate very manageable. $10 for some of the meals is really great, and $10 for some of the other meals are not really great. So it probably would balance out in terms of the cost of what that meal would be to provide. I just think this is some of our quite often marginalized seniors who this is the only meal that they can get sometimes in a day. So if we can maybe look at how we could just keep that cost from increasing. The increase this time is 2%. Maybe we should flatline it for a year or so. The other question I have is actually related to something that a resident sent me on Kitchener utility account fees, and I had completely forgotten about this until I saw the user fees come out, and I should have addressed it earlier, but I thought, well, I'll try and address it now. So what I'm hearing and understanding is that there are a number of fees attached to a setup fee for property taxes, a setup fee for stormwater, and then if a tenant is renting, that there is an additional setup fee for utilities. That comes to, for this particular resident, $130.40. I couldn't find where that would be in our user fees, and so maybe somebody can direct me to where I would have found that. But I would also like to understand this alarming user fee. It seems a bit three times for setup. Seems a bit much. If it's already set up through the owner of the house, why would it need to have another setup fee for the tenant of the house? Anybody help me with that?
Mr. Haggie?
So I believe the fees being referred to are on page 237, and they're in the revenue section. So they're related in some cases to Kitchener utilities, but it's also for property taxes and those sorts of things. So I believe the fee is $12.69 utility account administration fee. Mm-hmm. The one underneath it, $12.70 property ownership changes, potentially, it depends on the specific circumstance that's happening here. In my understanding, these fees are essentially there's work required to enter people into the system so the right people are being billed. And so it's the cost for the system, for the staff to do that, to set up the fee, set up a brand new account. So for instance, I moved last year, I had to pay that fee one time, and now I get my bill, and it just continues on. So I pay that bill one time, and everything is fine after that. But if I choose to move again, then I need to be taken off my old account, be put on my new account, and there's a cost to the city associated with doing that. And so these fees are required.
Okay, sir, Mr. Chapman, do you want to add?
Sorry.
Through Mr. Chair, I'll just add a bit more background. This fee was introduced a couple of years ago by a council decision, and it was a specific approval that council made. We bill thousands and thousands of accounts this fee every year, and it generates hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue for the city. It was introduced because we saw that it was commonplace for other municipalities, including those that are our neighbors within the region, and also for gas and water utilities. So it's not surprising that we get complaints about the fee. Certainly people aren't happy to have to pay it, but I would suggest that given the thousands that we bill every year, the fact that we have a few complaints is not unreasonable. And at the end of the day, if this fee were eliminated or reduced, it would be a substantial impact on the tax rate to basically put these costs back onto the tax bill.
Okay. And I would certainly understand the rationale for a setup fee for property taxes when somebody purchases a house, and then again for the storm water, because those are really two different accounts and two different divisions in the city. But if I decided to rent my house, now I have to set up another account for my tenant? Like, why wouldn't I just require some kind of a name change as opposed to a brand-new account?
So through the chair, I'd suggest that maybe we can follow up offline to look at the specifics of that situation. Typically, it would only be at most $80 for a property owner that's switching. I think the issue that you've highlighted is the fact that right now the city bills tenants directly for utilities. In other municipalities, the property owner pays the utility bills. Certainly that would be a significant change for us if we were to make utilities the responsibility of the property owner, not the tenant. So I would argue that most property owners like the fact that we handle billing of tenant utilities and also tenant arrears, and many would not want to take on that responsibility themselves.
Okay, all right, that's it. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Schneider.
Thank you, Chair Davey. I had some discussions with Mr. Hagee over the weekend on email, but just wanted to go on record. I know I have to speak with clerks about this, but getting a breakdown of the costs for applying for a minor variance for a committee of adjustment when it comes to a fence. There are times when residents are actually paying more for the application for the slight variance than the fence itself. So I just wanted to be able to justify those costs to residents.
Thank you, Councillor Gazzola.
On 2-12 and a number of pages, there are decreases in the licensing fee, and it says according to a 3-year plan. What is that all about?
Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is a situation where staff did some analysis a few years ago and found that we had priced ourselves out of the market for licensed event at our community centers and pools. And so a 3-year plan was put into place to reduce those fees to get to more competitive rates with other facilities in the hopes that we can attract more business.
I'm surprised, we're competing with other people. Is that what our recreational facilities are all about, or?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we get regular calls from community groups asking to hold licensed events in our facilities.
What does it cost for a license? Are we making a profit on what they have to pay for a license?
Through you, Mr. Chair, so we would just have a flow-through cost for the license.
You didn't answer my question. What do they cost?
So I certainly don't have that detailed information. I can certainly get that for council.
On 213, kitchen fees are declining. What's happening there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, what we've had in recent, over the past year is an experience where community groups are asking to use our kitchens in community centers, but they don't want to use the rest of the facility. And so this is to actually allow them to do that without having to charge them rates which would be higher because it would include all of the facility.
I came late, and I don't know if someone asked about 243 new road occupancy permits. Did someone ask? Well, then fine, I don't ask. On 244, there's electric charge rate has increased really substantially. What's the story there?
Mr. Reedman.
Through the chair, so the rate is actually a neutral rate change. It's going from kilowatt hours to an hourly charge. So 50 cents for an hour is equivalent to 20 cents per kilowatt hour. We just have to, we can't charge based on kilowatt hours. KW Hydro does that. So we're making an administrative change to the rate. So we're charging an hourly fee instead of kilowatt hours.
Well, how can I compare it? I just said 144% increase. That can't be just from the different way of charging, is it?
So the chargers work basically 1 hour is about 2.5 kilowatt hours of charging time. So the fee is about, it works out in the wash in the end. So it is the exact same fee, it's just being metered differently.
All right, so that's different, so there's no increase. So my 144% is not correct.
That's correct.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Etherington.
Through you, Mr. Chair, a couple of questions. Just for some more detail, on page 2-3, the building fees, there is no increase on any of them, and mention of us reaching the target on building stabilization reserve. Could I get some more detail on that, on both? Why we are not increasing fees, and secondly, that reserve fund stabilization reserve?
Mr. May?
So through you, Mr. Chair, this is something that council would have seen previously, where our chief building official engaged the home builders liaison group, and they agreed back in 2017 to actually reduce fees by 5% and then hold them steady over a number of years. And so this year is simply implementing that agreement. I would say that there is a large unknown right now related to how many building permit applications will come in advance of the end of the downtown DC exemptions. And so we do anticipate that building revenues will go up in advance of 2019. And so at that point, we'll look at the fees again and decide whether a reduction is in line or whether we might actually increase the fees to ensure that the stabilization reserve is on its target.
When we say it's on track, is it above or below or where we expect it to be?
Mr. Haggie?
Through the chair, it's currently above its target, which is why there was a reduction in fees and why it's being held flat. There was an option provided to the building industry last year to say, would you prefer to go to 5% and hold flat, or would you prefer to go minus 10% and then have 2% increases? You know, and in the end, come to the same place. The preference in the building industry was to have a 5% reduction and hold flat. So we're just holding true to the discussion we had last year.
Okay, I appreciate the answers. By the way, I'd be very surprised if the home builders recommended an increase. If we did that with every group, we'd never have an increase, I suspect. It's just a comment. The second one has to do with page 2-5. The mention there, the actual item is on page 245, and that is the water heater rentals. That's a 5% increase. Could I get some more detail on that? That seemed out of whack with a lot of the other increases.
Mr. Haggie?
Sure. Through the chair, it's been practice for the Kitchener utility or Kitchener utilities to raise those rates only periodically, so every, say, 3 years, and do an increase of more than inflation. So in a single year. If you take that 5% and split it over 3 years, it actually is inflation, right around 1.7%. The discussion in the past and in polling customers, their preference has been to have a periodic increase of, say, 5 or 10% as opposed to a 2% increase every year.
Okay, thank you. And on page 2-22, item 745, there's one caught my attention there, affiliated track and field. That increase again seems very high. Can I get explanation of that increase? I believe it's 13%.
Mr. May?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sorry, could Councillor Etherington just repeat the number?
I'm sorry, Mr. May. It's on page 222, item 745.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this is actually a fee that we charge to the KW Club in order to rent out St. David's School. So it's actually just a flow-through. It's the charge from the school board to the user group.
Okay, thank you. And my last one, I was just curious. On page 2-35, item number 1189, do we charge obviously we do, a busker license? I was curious about that, judging by the quality of some of our buskers. Could I get some more detail on that? 1189, page 2-35.
Mr. Bloom.
Through the chair, yes, I'll get you some information on that. I do believe the main area that we actually license buskers is at the Kitchener Market, so I'll follow up with my friends at the market to see if we actually charge that in order for them to busk at the market.
Well, obviously we license some buskers, but not all buskers. Is that my understanding?
Through the chair, and I may have to follow up with our friends in licensing, but there is an actual, to be a licensed busker on the street, there is a fee to be paid. I don't think we've really enforced that. We haven't gone out and enforced individuals to make sure that they actually have their license in the past, but it is a fee that exists.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. Most of my questions have been asked. I just have one it's on page 2-7, items number 2 and 3 about the market. I'm just wondering if we define a table by the linear foot, like some of the tables are quite varying in size. Just wondering how if the fees differ for the larger ones versus the smaller ones.
Mr. Bloom.
My apologies, I was still writing my notes down from the previous question. Do you mind just quickly I caught the last half of your question.
The market vendor fees, I'm just wondering about the whether or not we vary in what we charge the vendors based on the length of their stall or the size of their stall.
Through the chair, yes, we do. A few years ago, they did try to standardize. Previously, there was no standardization to how the fees went, but now they've been continually moving to a model where they're trying to standardize that everyone's paying for the amount of space that they use.
Okay. It's not indicated in the fees, though. It just looks like one table is this price and one refrigerated table is that price. It just would be nice to know, because I know that some of the vendors at this point are struggling with the costs, and it would be good to make sure that we're being fair and reasonable in what we charge. But I can talk further with staff offline on that. Also, I just want to thank Councillor Galloway-Seelock and Councillor Schneider for raising the fence Committee of Adjustment fee, because I agree that it is quite costly and it would be good to see if there's a possibility to either keep it at the way it was for 2017 or even see if there are any options for us to lower that fee.
Okay, there's no one else in the queue. I have no questions. I'm quite content with where we are in this. So could I get a mover for this item? Moved by Councillor Fernandez. Any comments? Mayor Rabinovich?
Well, just one quick one, just a reminder that in moving it, I presume we're taking out the line that the fire chief referenced?
Yes, line 800. We received an email. I believe it's 800.
Line,
received an email on that earlier. So yes, that would be removed.
Yeah, line, just one sec, 800.
Okay, no comments. I'll just comment briefly that I'm content. I think these increases, I think staff looked at them very carefully. They're some areas where there weren't increases at all, and I think in many cases, actually, I think looks like the number of increases were below the 2% threshold, which I think is a reasonable one, and hopefully that will give us offset some pressure come budget time. So I will support. As moved by Councillor Fernandez, those in favor? And that carries with everyone here. And the final item for Finance and Corporate Services, Shanley Street, tax sale. There's no presentation on this item, so we will get right into questions. And I see Councillor Marsh in the queue already. When you're ready.
Wonder why. I'd like to move this item at the appropriate time. And I do have a question for staff about number 3 in the recommendation. We are recommending that this property be advertised for a second time, but we don't have a time frame. I imagine that's intentional, and I'm just wondering if there's a possibility to add a deadline or a time frame in that line. And would by the end of 2018 be feasible? Sorry, I'm catching off guard. You can think about it, and we can talk later if because we don't have to finalize it.
Ms. McDonald?
Yes, in terms of that, as you know, the charrette's going to happen in the first 6 months, so it'll be sometime in the latter part, the latter 6 months, that it'll be advertised. So you're right, if you wanted to add wording that it happened within 2018, I think that's quite acceptable.
Wonderful. That sounds great. I'd like to add that minor amendment.
Very good. Councillor Gazzola?
Who is the treasurer? Are you still the treasurer? Pardon? I didn't know that, no. Is that going forward, or is that... Okay. I just wondered whether the resolution had to be changed or not. That's fine. Was this amount 100% reserved in setting up the allowance for doubtful accounts?
Mr. Chapman.
So to your first question, yes, until my successor is appointed, I'll continue to serve as treasurer. And yes, this was fully provided for in the allowance for doubtful accounts.
Now, what is the balance of the allowance for doubtful accounts now, after this would be taken into account?
What I can advise is that we have fully allowed for contaminated properties, and so it's not a general allowance. So if your concern is, does this leave us exposed for other liabilities? No, it doesn't, because this amount was specifically identified as a line item within the allowance.
So what is the total allowance?
I don't have that with me. We can, if that's important, we can certainly.
I can look it up too. I didn't get my book into. The other question, I may know the answer, but why do we write the interest off before? Why can we not write the interest off after the sale?
Through the chair, that's the wording of the Act, that we need to have an unsuccessful tax sale before we consider the write-down.
Okay, I wondered if that was the case, yeah. That's all, thank you.
No one else is in the queue. Just in general terms, is this, I guess 2 questions really. Are there other properties like this within the city of Kitchener that there will be challenges going forward? And as a follow-up, is this sort of an issue that I think faces several municipalities, or are we an anomaly? I'm curious. If you can comment on that. Ms. McDonald?
Yes, I may advise that I think this is faced by a lot of municipalities, so it's not new to us. We are aware of other properties in the city of Kitchener, obviously, that have contamination that are in tax arrears, but each property would have to be reviewed on their own merit because there's always extenuating circumstances or twists to the details. So we don't see this as precedent setting in any way. It's specifically for 152 Shanley Street.
Okay, I'm very supportive of where we are because I think we're doing the best that we can within the rules that we're allowed. But I guess the question is there a movement at all at any level? Like, should we be looking at a movement at adjusting the rules from the provincial level to sort of free up our options in terms of having more control over a property without necessarily taking the liability of it?
I can tell you each time there's amendments to the Municipal Act, there's always been suggested changes to the tax sale provisions, and there have been a number of amendments over the years. So one of the key ones, which is what it allows this property to be advertised, is that it used to be that any property advertised for tax sale, if it was unsuccessful, it automatically became the property of the city. And so no city would undertake a tax sale of a contaminated site. They took that rule out in 2001. So we're in a position now where we can advertise a site like Shanley Street. So there are improvements along the way, and staff is always looking for and suggesting improvements. So it's one of those things that they do creep into the legislation as legislation is amended.
Okay, very good. I see no one else in the queue. It's been moved by Councillor Marsh. Any comments? I'm not seeing any. Those in favor? And again, that carries to everyone that's present today. And that concludes Finance. But Councillor Fernandez, question?
Yes, I do have a couple of questions from the business plan, so I would like to move that out of information into discussion.
Okay, so we would have, that does require a vote, majority of council. So those in favor of that, and that carries. Councillor Fernandez.
Okay. Thank you. As I was reviewing the business plan, I had a number of questions which I was very thankful that staff were able to respond through email, but there's a couple that I wanted to go through. Sorry, it's going to take me a minute to find them all.
I'd just like to add, just for the benefit, and I'll pause your time, just for the benefit of the majority of council as a refresher, the business plan does literally cover everything the corporation does, so we can't really get, I mean, the idea is it's an update, so if we start approaching it as an opportunity to ask questions about everything and anything, I don't think staff's prepared for that, nor are the appropriate staff here. So if there's burning issues, for sure, I think you can ask the questions, but if we get into several specifics on different items, I think that's more of an offline appropriate conversation to be brought up at another time. But just
and that's why I asked all of my questions through emails?
Yeah, again, yeah, not just for your benefit, just for the benefit of all of the committee.
Okay.
So when you're ready.
So the one thing that, and I still can, Mr. Carmichael here, but I guess he stepped out again. I'm hearing, and I wanted to know from him if he's hearing more and more from residents about lighting concerns. So what seems to be happening with the new lighting is it's more targeted, it's more street level and not spilling over into front yards, which you'd think most people would be happy with, but I'm hearing from a number of my residents on major streets and larger streets with a bit more traffic that they're feeling uncomfortable and feeling less safe. So I just wanted to have an understanding from Mr. Carmichael how much of that he's been hearing. And then the other...
In lieu of Mr. Carmichael, I think Mr. Reedman will do his best.
Through the mayor, so I'm speaking at a conference next week on our street lighting, so I actually have the numbers with me on this one. We've received 6 complaints related to properties being too dark out of almost 16,000 lights that have been retrofit so far. I think part of the issue with our old lights is that they did have a lot of light pollution and people were just accustomed to that. Proper roadway lighting should really only light up the roadway and the sidewalk.
Right. And how are we, I mean, I know that one of your staff has been looking into how we can give people a sense of comfort and security around the fact that we're not spilling over into their front yards and onto the sidewalks anymore. Is there something that we can, how can we help people feel a little bit more comfortable in those situations?
Through the chair, so porch lights are a great thing if people want to turn on their porch light, and it creates a more welcoming environment for the community as well. So that's how a lot of places deal with it, but there are a lot of other benefits that we get out of this. Like we have dark sky compliant lights, so people can actually see the stars again. There's a whole bunch of factors. We're saving 60 to 80% energy on the installation, which results in greenhouse gas reductions for the city. So I think there's a lot of positives that outweigh some of the perceived negatives.
Yeah, no, and I'm not disagreeing with you at all, Mr. Reedman. I'm just saying that, if people are feeling uncomfortable. So thank you. Thanks for those responses. With regard to the e-tendering, I had a communication with Ms. Palmer around, and I think I had said something when we talked about some changes to our purchasing bylaw around a possible strat session and training with some of the changes that are happening. So I just wanted to raise that as well, as I think that that's something that maybe we should be looking at in the spring with some of the changes that are happening. And I think that was all the questions I had. Thank you.
Very good. Councillor Gazzola.
Just a quick question on IF13, the Iron Horse Trail improvement. It states that project needs to be re-tendered as original yielded no bids. Can just give a little more information relating to that? I didn't. There were 3 sections, an A, B, and a C, right?
Which page, Councillor Gazzola?
IF1-3.
Thank you.
There were 3 sections on the Iron Horse Trail, and it seems have any of those sections been done, or what is this relating to? I thought the tender went out. I thought it was accepted and work was done. Am I out to lunch again?
Through the chair, I can follow up on specific detail. We did have a section of the trail, as the report says, that we tendered out. We received absolutely no bids, so staff has gone back. You will see, as part of the budget process this year, a potential to combine 2 sections of the trail before we re-tender.
Okay, Councillor Gazzola, good. Councillor Fernandez, another question?
I remembered, it wasn't really a question, but a comment. It's on under CAO's department and one IF1-4. We were talking about the next steps for communications and the way that we're going to be doing some communications for the public and citizens at large. One of the things that I've observed over the last number of years is when we do communication to the public, a press release after a council meeting or committee meeting, it often just says that council approved. I wondered if there would be some consideration to putting the numbers to the vote so that citizens understand that not always is council 100% in support of. So if there is a vote that is 7-8 or a vote that's 6-5, that citizens understand that there are a number of councillors that may not agree with whatever was passed on that particular night. Is that something that we could consider doing in our communications as we move forward?
Ms. Miller?
Through the chair, that's feedback that I can take back and we can have a discussion about, maybe come back to you with an answer. I believe we have had a discussion about it in the past, but I can't recall right now why we wouldn't have done it.
Okay, thank you. I'd appreciate hearing back from you in the future. Thanks.
Okay, and again, I'll just comment on that briefly if I could. I think that's worthy of that wasn't council direction, at least it wasn't yet, and I do have some concerns when council starts directing communications coming out of the corporation of City of Kitchener on an individual basis. So if there are serious considerations with that respect, I think it should come as part of a committee and council motion as opposed to individual direction. And again, I'm not even sure how I feel with that. I may ultimately be comfortable with it, but it's something that I think requires some more consideration. Yeah, that's certainly. I just want to be clear on that. So again, that concludes Finance and Corporate Services. Councillor Ioannidis, we will start community infrastructure in 10 minutes.